Pleasant good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Paul Mullen, along with Brian Gowans and Alex McDonald here for WCBC, and Ryan Brenneman helping us tremendously from Allegany Media as we present our 2020 primary election, Allegany County Board of Education Candidate Forum. The candidates this evening, we will give you the list before we actually go to them on video. The incumbents are Tammy Fraley, David Bond, and Ed Root. The challengers are Deb Littman, Crystal Bender, Linda Wittmeyer, Toni Ottaviani, Mikeelliptic, and Steve Lewis. Dr. Bond was unable to make it to the broadcast here this evening, or link in, we should say, as he is working, and he did submit a statement that we will read to you now. It is with regret that I am not able to be part of the forum tonight. My practice has been working shortened hours due to the COVID crisis, and this week we are only open Wednesday and Thursday due to Memorial Day. Our highest patient demand is from 4 to 6 p.m., and I could not reasonably leave the entire patient load on my associate. I appreciate the effort of WCBC to host the candidate forum, but suggest that future forums be, and my computer screen went down, but that's okay. Anyhow, the gist of the argument, or not the argument, but the presentation, is that he can't make it, and he wanted to suggest that in the future we would consider having this later in the evening, and we will take that under advisement. We have run it at 5 o'clock for the past several election cycles with not a big problem at all. However, we do understand Dr. Bond not being able to make it as a candidate here to present his views this evening. We have Brian Gowans with us, and Brian will be presenting the questions along with me this evening, and we appreciate your attention as we get through the evening and the questioning. The candidates will be shuffled every now and then, so the same person is not following the same person. We have found that to be advantageous in getting accurate views, and plus there's always the opportunity to where the candidate would follow the same candidate and you'd wind up with the candidate saying, well, I agree with that, and that does not give them an opportunity to present their view first either. Now, with our first question, the news director of WCBC, Brian Gowans.
Good afternoon, candidates. Our first question. At the end of the 2018 year, the outgoing school board began a process that ultimately led to the state removing Wayne Foote from the board. Many in the community felt this essentially was an attempt to nullify the prior election and subverted the will of the people. Do you feel the board took the appropriate course of action by involving the state?
And we go to candidate Deb Littman first on this one. Deb?
Well, obviously that was a very controversial decision, but I think ultimately that the board did take the right steps. There has to be certain appropriate behavior on any board, and if that is not, if that's not happening, then steps have to be taken, and I think the right thing was done there.
Our next candidate to answer this question will be Crystal Bender. Crystal?
Sorry about that. I was muted. Can you repeat that one more time? Because you didn't so much ask, was it the right decision? You asked if they took the proper steps. Am I correct?
Yes. Basically, some in the community felt that by the local board taking the action that they did and letting it up to the state to make that decision, it was removing a twice elected board member, and he had been elected actually the second time after many of the allegations were already in the public. So do you feel that it was appropriate for the local board to bring the state into the process?
I would say that, yes, if it's a situation that the local board hadn't been through before, didn't have experiences with, then yes, I think that seeking other guidance in any situation like that when you're not sure of the best situation is always a good thing. Be honest if you're not sure what to do and reach out to someone who does. That doesn't mean maybe it should have been left up to the state, but reaching out to them, I think probably would have been a good idea, yes.
Our next candidate to answer, Ed Root.
Thank you. Of all the traits that a candidate must have to serve on the Board of Education, integrity is probably foremost. A standard of behavior is obviously required. Having served on the State Board of Education and having been involved in removing people from local boards previously, I would say, based on what I saw, and I did testify, although I didn't hear other people testify, I was subpoenaed and required to testify against Mr. Foote. And I think the ultimate test was that what I saw presented in the evidence went beyond probably any other person that I saw removed from the Maryland State Board of removed by the Maryland State Board of Education. And I think that's the ultimate criterion. Apparently, the administrative law judge and the Maryland State Board of Education thought there was sufficient evidence to uphold the charges. I would also add that the Attorney General of the state of Maryland made some pretty strong comments about Mr. Foote's behavior.
Our next answer to this question will come from Linda Wittmeyer. Linda?
I'm going the other way. I think this should have been something that was handled when it happened. You don't wait until the week before someone takes office for the second time to contact the state board. I think it was something that may have been able to be handled within the county. I can say personally that I've known Wayne Foote for 30 years, and I found that whole debacle very hard to stomach.
Toni Ottaviani. Toni, can you give us your answer to the question? You may still be on mute.
Oh, this is Tammy Fraley. I don't see him online.
Okay.
Even a picture.
All righty. Then Tammy, since you pointed that out, you get to go next.
That's great.
Go ahead.
I think that what was done during that time, we followed the process that was required per policy. There's a local policy regarding ethics and integrity and behavior as a school board member, as well as we have an ethics panel. In the process that was followed, not always was it detailed out in the press as to what was occurring, but it was detailed out after the trial was done, which was that we did reach out locally to our ethics panel. We went through the process of internally through the Board of Education. And then the ethics panel suggested that we go to the state board. And then that's when it went to the state board, because as Dr. Root has stated, it's ultimately the state board's decision to remove a board member. The local board couldn't make that decision ourselves. Our local county couldn't make that decision themselves. It's per law, that's where it stands, is at the state board level. So I believe that we did follow the process, and I believe that the key there is that you do need to be held accountable for your actions, and you need to be held accountable for the position that you take on the school board, or any elected official for that matter. Needs to have integrity and needs to be able to follow and be an example. And that's why it was done the way it was. Again, it was following policies and procedures. It was not a personal type of thing.
Thank you. Mikeelliptic, your chance at the question.
Thanks for the question, Paul. This was a very controversial issue that had stemmed for months and months. And unfortunately, anytime there is an accusation of the magnitude that was against Mr. Foote, it has to be investigated, and it has to be investigated which was conducted by the local Board of Education. And I do believe escalating that to the State Board of Education was in the best interest of our local area, because it alleviates a lot of the bias that could have been happening through the removal at the local level. So, the having the state make the decision, I believe, was in the best interest of our county and our local Board of Education. And I believe it was the right decision. Thank you.
And the final candidate to tackle this one, Steve Lewis. Steve?
Yeah, I understand all the timelines, and I think everything was done appropriately. The only thing that really bothered me in the whole, I don't know if if I have the whole story. I could only read what was reported by the radio and the newspaper. But the only thing that really bothered me was the timeline. I think some of these things, and maybe they were, I don't know, I'm not privileged to that. These things maybe should have been addressed in a more timely manner whenever they first happened. I agree with what Linda Wittmeyer said. I agree with what Ed Root said. Somewhere in the middle, Ed, we followed all the procedures, but as Linda said, the timeline did not look good. And I don't know, maybe we did address the allegations and things like that in a timely manner when they happened, but it just seemed like everything hit right at the last second. So I think it was handled appropriately, but again, I don't think the timeline was handled very well.
Thank you. Our next question. During the last 10 weeks, COVID-19 has changed the way education was delivered. What parts of the response should become permanent parts of the educational experience? And we'll turn the order around here and go to Steve Lewis first on this one. Steve?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it has. It's been very detrimental, and it's also taught us a few things that we need to build upon. I mean, one of the things is online learning, and I got some experience from this because I have 4 grandkids, and the 4 grandkids that I have are all with online learning, obviously. And the teachers have been great. The teachers actually probably have been working a lot harder online than they were in their classrooms because it's all new. But one thing we think we need to put in everybody's hands is, and I think we're doing that, is a Chrome notebook or a tablet, whatever you call those, because it's very hard to sometimes use your smartphone, to use a tablet, to use an iPad, because it just doesn't have the capabilities of what a laptop computer or a Chromebook have. And I struggled with that, and my grandkids struggled with that until we figured out that you can't do everything on a phone. You can't do everything on a iPad. You need to have that laptop. And once we got on how to use it, I mean, I think education flew. I think the teachers put the lesson plans out there. They offered things that kids probably didn't have experience with as far as technology, and really grew from this. I think online can be a way to go with some of the course offerings. I know we did this when I was principal. We had some online learning. We had some kids that were high flyers that were taking courses that we couldn't offer in the regular day. So I think we've learned a lot from this, and I think it gives us the opportunity to keep moving on with online learning. Thank you.
Mikeelliptic, your take on this?
COVID has definitely taken the world by storm, and we're living in unprecedented times, and it's going to be an adjustment for us to continue, and we really don't know how we're going to continue in the future with certain things. But I do believe that the Board of Education locally has done an outstanding job with putting the necessary implications in place for distance learning. And I know that, distance learning is going to be the wave of the future. I believe it's really going to excel the opportunities. I'm very fortunate that the most of my collegiate career has been through online learning. It's an outstanding resource. And the only issue that I see locally is the fact that we don't have adequate broadband service covering the entire county. And I believe this is something that we're going to have to advocate for now, starting now and into the future, to our local elected officials to really be able to connect our community to the internet. I mean, this is the year 2020. We shouldn't have areas such as our rural area without broadband internet access. So that's definitely one of the obstacles that we're facing, and it needs to be resolved. But I believe that online education is definitely going to be used more frequently as we move into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy Fraley, your answer.
I think that what we've learned is that our county is very resilient and has become part of the leading edge of working through the issues in a quick manner. Being one of the rural counties, and also since I serve on the Maryland Board of Elections, I think that part of what we've learned is that we're not the only ones without internet, but we need to work together with those counties to help our county officials understand our need. Because I was on a conference call with the senators, and part of what they said is, you can consider this more like a utility. Back before you didn't have electricity, and it became common to get electricity to everybody wherever they were. And now this is kind of the same thing that really, like Mr. Lewis said, getting them laptops is key too. And the county did a really good job of that. And with federal funding, we'll be able to make sure every student has that. But we found out just that's not enough, because especially if you look at Little Orleans and Flintstone and those places, they just don't have the ability to get it to their houses, even if somebody tried. So right now, that's that we need to focus on. I think that's something that we learned from it. And I think that the other part of it is that the online learning, I think it has been amazing. But we also need to consider the special education aspect. Our county has quite a large volume of special education students, and we need to figure out how it is best to work with them, because they have some special needs that need to be met, and it's hard to do that remotely. But the special education department is doing an amazing job of coming up with ways to do that. I know I have a friend that has that, as a student that's in that, and she has Zoom calls with them, every day, and they're almost as close as they can get, right?
Okay.
As far as being able to talk.
Okay, we hit time there. Linda Wittmeyer, what say you?
I say the same as we've heard from the other candidates. I think that we found out that we didn't always have to do same old, same old. I think everybody stepped up, and it was something new. We had never done this before. And for all the naysayers who said this is not going to work, it has worked. My granddaughter is a fourth grader in Frederick County. Every student in her school has a Chromebook. That made it so much easier for all of those children to do their work. And every week they had a group lesson with their teacher. They got to see their friends again. They got to ask the teacher questions. And I know that our teachers here were doing the same. They were trying to keep the kids connected. I agree with the broadband. I think it's time for us to pressure our legislators and make them look at the broadband situation very seriously in the next session, because this has shown us that there's too many sections of our county that doesn't have access to the internet. And I think with everything COVID has shown us, schoolwork, telemed, all of that, it's something that is a necessity now. And I said in the last forum with the chamber that I agree it should be a utility, and everyone in our county should have access to the internet. Thank you.
Ed Root, your comment.
Well, basically what we did was use online and learning packets. And it would be very easy to pick out all the problems we had. But the thing that amazes me is, because teachers work so hard, and because administrators work so hard, and the kids and the parents were cooperative, a lot was accomplished, and it wasn't a loss. Well, it probably wasn't as good as being in class, but it was amazingly effective. The problems that I see are, and Mr. Lewis pointed it out, parents at home have different hardware. We need to make sure there is a commonality so that everybody has the same opportunity. Everybody has also pointed out the connectivity. Our instructional technology department tells us about 20% of our kids do not have access to the internet in any way. There's another group of students whose parents, because of economic circumstances, don't have a computer. Now, we went a long way toward taking care of that with the Chromebooks. And what we have learned is if we could get a Chromebook in everyone's hands and get better connectivity, we can do online very effectively. The one thing that I think we can take from this is if we have to do it again in the fall, it'll be smoother because we're not starting from scratch as we did this time.
Crystal Bender, could we have your comments?
So our family, we're fortunate enough to have had a very pleasant experience with all of this. We have computer access at home. We have high-speed internet. So our kids have had a good experience with it. Their teachers have worked really hard. Moving forward, I desperately hope that in the fall things are back to normal, but we don't know if that's reality. And I think that moving forward when students are absent, something that's going to become permanent once they're back in school with using Google Classroom and all the online things. It may be easier when students have to be out now to get caught up on their work. Things can be posted. We know that they can utilize things on Google Classroom and all the other formats that are being used. I also worry about the students that don't have internet access. I'm from Flintstone. My parents still don't have high-speed internet. I've talked a couple times about utilizing in the local neighborhoods, Flintstone, Little Orleans. I'm sure Mount Savage, Georges Creek, certain areas have the same problem. Can we get the fire hall involved? And I was told that the county is working on hotspots and certain things in the parking lots for the school, which is fantastic. But if we're not back to normal in the fall, then can we possibly get something set up where they can utilize inside with social distancing? Maybe we can get some computers and printers where once a week the students can go in and upload an assignment or download a video they need to watch that they can't do at home, print off some papers that they need because they don't have county library in some of those areas like Cumberland does. So there's pros and cons.
And the final candidate to answer this question, Deb Littman. Deb?
So you asked specifically, I think, what parts we would want to keep. I agree absolutely that one of the most important things that has happened during this time is that we've gotten Chromebooks into the hands of a lot of students who did not otherwise have computers or hardware at home that allowed them to utilize online learning. And that's something that will continue to be important even when kids do go back into the classroom. So much of schoolwork and work in general and all of life's work takes place online now. So it's important that students have the hardware they need, whether they're entirely online or whether they're back in the classroom for most of the day. I think that's really important. I think it's also been a benefit that teachers who maybe didn't know much about Google Classroom or Class Dojo, who weren't familiar with those resources, were given an incentive to find out more about those and see how they can be of use in their classrooms, again, during this time of necessary online learning, but also once we're back in the classroom, how those kinds of resources can enhance their classrooms, even in normal times. I agree wholeheartedly about the Wi-Fi access, internet access. It's a must. There is a lot of inequity in our county, and that leads to educational inequity. The fact that the Board of Education and the county have worked to get hotspots in school parking lots, I think has been a huge help to many families who don't have Wi-Fi access at home. And fixing that problem of access will, again, be a help to students, whether they're completely online or whether they're back in the classroom.
Candidate Toni Ottaviani has joined us, and Toni, I'll repeat the question for you. During the last 10 weeks, COVID-19 has changed the way education was delivered. what parts of the response should become permanent parts of the educational experience in Allegheny County?
Oh, man. Well, my personal experience with this has been pretty difficult because my son, who's 10, has had a very hard time with the online process, period. He's not responded to it at all. And I know that he may be in the minority, but we've done the physical paper packets that are, I mean, our teachers here at Bel Air have been so great to help work with us. But, you know, so he's got those and he's doing the worksheets each day. And that's the way he does it, likes to do it. And he's come right now. I mean, if they were grading him right now on his actual work, he'd be doing C or D work. He's struggled big time. So as far as I'm concerned, I hope we open up in September and this never happens again, because I like the idea of teachers teaching. I like the idea of hands-on, because just the information itself is not the only way we're learning. We're learning because of the person who's teaching it, and we're learning because of the environment in which it's being taught. So much of this online learning thing, I think, it's a great emergency. You know, let's say.
Okay, Tony, we're having a problem with your internet signal.
Even consider as the norm. Oh, sorry.
We're having
Anyway,
a problem with your.
I don't know. I'm not a big technology guy, but I really wish it gets back to normal very soon. And we open up in the fall and get teachers back to teaching in person. That's what I hope.
Okay, the internet signal seems to have made your point, at least there, huh? Okay, very good. We are going to take a break now in our coverage. WCBC AM 1270, FM 103.1, and WCBCRadio.com, along with Allegheny Media, presenting our Allegheny County Board of Education Candidate Forum. When we come back, Brian Gowans will have a question. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back as we continue with our candidate forum here from the studios of Allegany Media, WCBC, AM 1270, FM 103.1, and WCBCRadio.com. Now, here is a reaction question that we're not going to put out for an answer, but to let the candidates know what the reaction was. Alex McDonald from our staff is on hand here and monitoring our Facebook feed. And Alex, what'd you get?
Mr. Iman, Tim Iman, posted during the forum that what do you propose be done about the students who refuse to complete work online or through the packets that they're being offered?
Okay, we'll may get to that answer later in the forum.
I would just like to remind people that they can submit their questions and we will get to them.
Yeah, but I do want our candidates to know we are getting reaction as they are speaking, and we are doing this live, so it helps that way too. Brian Gowans has our next question for our candidates. Go ahead, Brian.
It has been more than a year since David Cox announced he'd be stepping down as Allegany County Superintendent of Schools, and to date, a permanent replacement has not been named. And just for a little history, the process thus far has consisted of naming an interim, taking action a few months later to appoint that interim as the permanent superintendent, the state stepping in to overturn that decision, an announcement that a search for a permanent would begin, only to halt that search recently, and the extension by another year for the interim until a new search for a permanent change can begin. How would you grade the board's handling of this situation?
And to answer this question first will be Crystal Bender. Crystal?
So I think that before coronavirus, a search did need to be done. This is an organization, you're representing the community. I don't think that you should just pick an individual without advertising the position. That doesn't mean it has to be a costly search, but I think a search does need to be done in some format. Now with coronavirus in place, I think hands down best decision is to appoint Jeff Blank, keep him interim superintendent for another year. Next year, open the search back up. If Jeff Blank is interested, he can reapply, and anybody else in the area or nationally, however the search is done, can apply at that point. But I definitely think that the right decision was made to keep him in as interim and suspend the national search during this time.
Thank you. Toni Ottaviani, you are next.
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the decision making from start to finish to now to really judge anyone's actions or judgments on this. But I would think that with COVID to continue on as the next, we ought to maybe just allow that to be the case and vote on that and get it done, because I don't think anybody disagrees that he's done a good job. So why continue to put us through this and continue to prolong this process? Perhaps at this point, based on the circumstances that are with COVID-19, just go ahead. If he's willing to take the job, give it to him, because obviously it's somebody who at this point nobody has truly objected to, and is obviously doing a good job up to this point. So I think that maybe we just need to spare any more time wasted on this and continue to move forward with somebody we know is going to do a good job and has done so.
Thank you, Tony. Next, Steve Lewis, your answer.
Well, I think Jeff Blank's done a great job. He was a great I've known Jeff for a long time. He was a great teacher. He was a good assistant principal when he was at Fort Hill High School. He has good common sense, and he cares about kids, and he cares about learning. I think the board started out and did everything right. They got MABE involved. They were meeting all their timelines. The only thing that I would say is that when the pandemic hit, I would have pulled the plug a little bit earlier. I would have talked to the state superintendent. I would have talked to whoever I needed to communicate with and say, look, we're going to put this on hold for a year. We're going to ask Mr. Blank if he'll continue for another year, and then we're going to get on with the next search. I just think a little bit too much time passed, and I would have appointed Jeff as an interim long before we did. Thank you.
Next to answer the question, Ed Root.
Well, I've got to choose my words carefully, because being on the board, I know some things that we're not allowed to share. So I will choose. I'm not being evasive. I just can't say some things. Of all the jobs that an elected school board does, nothing matches the importance of selecting a permanent superintendent. Because when you hire a superintendent in Maryland, you've hired them for 4 years. A local board cannot fire a superintendent. The only way you can get rid of a superintendent is buy them out, have them resign or retire, or have the State Board of Education remove them for cause. And it has to be a strong cause. We had a good process set up. We had a great consultant. We went through MABE. We had good timelines. It was a little tight, but we didn't have the COVID-19 shutdown at the time we started this. And the board unanimously approved this. What we were running into at the end, because of the shutdown, it's very important that when you bring candidates in, perhaps the final 3, that they be able to meet the constituencies that they're going to represent. In previous years, they've had receptions where parents could come in. They had other receptions where teachers come in, where the business community would come in, elected officials, and so on, as well as central office staff and other people that need to be involved in this. We couldn't do that given the circumstances that exist under the shutdown. We were also faced with having to do interviews by video. That's not the most satisfactory way to really size up a person. We wanted to be able to sit across the table from them, look them in the eye, watch their body language, listen to their answers, be able to follow up on the spot.
Okay, you have timed out, Dr. Root.
Okay.
Next answer coming from Deb Littman. Deb?
Well, I was very glad to see the board decide to do a national search. I think that was the right way to go, and was very happy to see that they engaged MABE. I agree that the timeline looked good when they first started it, but nobody anticipated the COVID-19 pandemic and how that would affect it. In terms of whether they waited, the board waited too long to suspend the search for the year, I think that it was, if we remember, every day things were changing. And so you didn't know from one day to the next what was going to be possible in the coming weeks. So I think that the board did the best they could under this situation. I think that we are fortunate that Jeff Blank has agreed to serve as interim for another year so that we can conduct a search properly beginning next year for a superintendent to start in July of 2021. I agree that hiring a superintendent is the most important thing that a Board of Education does. So it's very important that we get this right. And I do think it's important that candidates come to our county, that our teachers and our parents and our administrators and our community get to meet those candidates, and that those candidates get to see who we are. So I think that we're in a good position now. We have someone familiar with the county school system who is going to be able to step in during this year, and we're going to be able to conduct a search nationwide and find the best candidate for superintendent for our school system.
Thank you. Linda Wittmeyer, your comments.
I also agree that it was the right decision to call off the search. I think Jeff Blank has done an excellent job. I think he is the right man to see our way out of this COVID situation. He was there from the beginning. I'm a little concerned why it took so long to make the decision to suspend the search. I don't agree that, we knew a long time ago we could have suspended it. I think there was some feet dragging there, and I just am happy that they did suspend it and that we have a little bit more time to get our ducks in order. I thought that was pretty quickly done. And I agree with Dr. Root. We wouldn't have had time for people to come in, to interview them in person. I think that's a very important thing. So I think the county has done the right thing. And I think we're going to see him get us through everything with the COVID. He's done it so far, and everybody seems to be happy with it. So I think the board did the right thing by suspending the search.
Next to answer the question, candidate Mikeelliptic.
I have always supported a national search. Quite frankly, we have one chance of getting this right. As Dr. Root commented, this is the most important position in a public education system. We have to make sure that we have the right candidate in place to move the school system forward. And my only argument during the last forum was the fact that with the technology that we have in place, there's no reason why we weren't able to conduct interviews through Skype or through Zoom or whatever means of technology that was being used. That was my only argument. But as far as the Board of Education extending Mr. Blank's interim status for an additional year is probably the best decision, just considering the implications with COVID and some of the other restraints that we've had to deal with. But as far as the interviewing process, hopefully can pick back up once things calm down and we can select someone who is the best qualified and ready to hit the ground running to make our schools a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy Fraley, you were in the midst of this. What are your thoughts?
I'd just like to note, much like Dr. Root said, I'll try to be as transparent as I can, but some things have to remain not. I think one of the things that needs to be recognized, much like I think it was Ms. Lippman that said, the timing of when it occurred was because everything was changing every day. And time-wise, we had done the process with MABE, and our original process with MABE was a unanimous vote to use MABE, and the first round of interviews was going to be done by Skype or Zoom or remotely because of saving money, not because of COVID at that time. So the way to look at it is when COVID hit on March 13th, we were, in our process, we're still going to be doing interviews remotely for the first round. And so that's why I believe that it kept continuing. We were going through that process. We stayed on that process until somebody brought the information to us to ask that we stop the process. And that's a board decision that had to be made. And as you all heard, that it was made, and it was a unanimous vote to stop the search. And some of you have seen the reported letters and things that went that are online. And those letters, which you now know, were dated April 30th. And that decision of sending that, it went out on April 30th to the state board to ask what our options were, because the law says that you have to hire a superintendent for 4 years or an interim for 1 year. And it's been common practice to only have an interim in place for 1 year, not consecutive years. But of course, COVID changed some of that. And that's what the letter asked, is that, because of COVID, would it be okay to have an interim for a second year? And we needed that information to be able to make any kind of discussion or decision. So I believe that we did the best that we could. And I believe that we will have to consider next year, if we're still in this case, we're going to have to consider how to do interviews, because we may still be here.
All right. Time expiring there. Our next question coming from me. Many students have less than ideal home lives. What is the role of the school system in helping children who face challenges beyond the classroom? And how should the system react to students who disrupt the classroom as a result of situations that occur outside of school? First, to answer this question, we'll go in reverse order this time. We go to Tammy Fraley first. Tammy?
I believe that the school system's main purpose is to educate our children, but we all have to recognize that the children are with us 8, 9, sometimes more hours a day. And those that have the less than ideal home lives we do have to consider that because it does impact their ability to be educated, whether it be food or support from their family, or just having someone that cares. And I think that the school system needs to work together with other agencies. It's not the sole responsibility of the school system. We need to do wraparound services where we work together with social services, the health department, and all of those type of things to be able to help the entire community. And we have the perfect avenue because we have the children in our schools. And I think that's something that we should utilize more by using wraparound services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mikeelliptic, you are next.
I believe a lot of the issues that, behavioral issues and other issues in terms to that can be rectified by just enhancing our mental health services in our school system. Having counselors available, opening the communication between students, teachers, and parents. It's just these steps we can utilize to really improve not only the education of the student, but the mental health as well. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm running for the Board of Education, is to hopefully make an impact by implementing additional programs and services that can really benefit the students' mental health aspect. And I believe that's very important, especially in an educational setting. And that's going to be one of my priorities if I am elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Wittmeyer, what say you?
I worked for close to 30 years with at-risk students. A lot of those kids came from not ideal homes, not homes like most of us grew up in. But I found that every one of those kids had something good inside. And it just took the right people coming together, working together, and it's everyone. It's the teachers, the guidance counselors, the administrators, everyone you can pull together to help these kids with behavioral problems or home problems. That's what you need to do. But I think we have to stop making excuses for children who may not have a wonderful home life. We have to stop making excuses for their parents. Respect is a very important word. And they have to learn to respect the teachers, the administrators, the people who are helping their children. And the children have to have that model to them too. I think the teachers need to have their classroom management back. The principals need to have site-based management with their buildings back, and everybody within that building do everything you can for those children. I have been in those homes. I have sat with those parents, and I've never had one tell me they don't want their child to do better than they didn't want their child to do better than they have. So the parents care about their children, even though they don't have the tools to deal with it.
Our next answer will come from candidate Deb Littman.
I think that the most important step here is to make sure that our school system has a very strong school-based mental health system in place. That means having counselors in the schools that can work with students who may be struggling, and also to have training for teachers and administrators in terms of identifying students who might be at risk and referring them to services that can help them, whatever they may be, whether they may be, with learning issues, with psychosocial issues. The key is to have a system in place that can identify students and hook them up with resources in the schools and in the community. I think a great first step but a great step recently that the board has taken is providing additional social workers in the schools. I think that has been a good move and will help students who come from situations that may make it harder for them to learn.
Ed Root, what do you think?
Well, I'm a very firm believer that kids are a product of their homes. Schools work very hard to try to overcome the deficiencies that exist in some homes. That's why I'm a big supporter of early childhood education. We start with kindergarten, but we need to get kids earlier. All schools now have some form of pre-K for 4-year-olds. The Kerwin Commission will go down even lower to 3-year-olds. That is really important. If you're going to overcome poverty, if you're going to make kids have equal opportunity and equal ability, you've got to get them into school and out of their home environment as much as you can while they're still very young. We also have other programs. For example, we have after-school programs where the kids have classes, they get help with homework, they have technology classes, they get recreation, and we give them what they call a snack, which is really a meal. For some kids, we serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I've seen kids in school who don't want snow days because if they have a snow day, they may not eat. Now, if you're hungry, I don't think you're going to be in a very good mood to learn in school. So we're overcoming that to some extent. The other problem that I think we have is I've never met a teacher who didn't care about their kids. And that's fundamental. Somebody that the kid has contact with every day that actually cares about them. That's important to the kids. The schools become a dumping ground for problems. If society's got a problem, well, we'll let schools take care of it. Whether it's drugs or whatever it is, we'll let schools take care of it. Problem is, we keep putting things in school, we never take anything out.
Thank you. Steve Lewis, I'd like to have your opinion.
I guess for 27 years, I have dealt with all these issues. I think it's very important that we have programs in place for mental health, for behavior problems. But let's go back and address one thing that hasn't been said so far. If you don't have a disciplined classroom, students can't learn. Teachers can't teach. And I think over the last, maybe 6 or 7 years, we've forgotten that. And we're not holding kids accountable. We're not holding parents accountable. For 20 years, when I was principal of Fort Hill High School, I developed a discipline matrix. It was called a progressive discipline matrix. And I shared it with every kid, every staff member, every stakeholder, every parent. They all knew what the discipline structure was for Fort Hill High School. It was so successful that we developed it for the county. And now we've kind of went away from that. And we aren't holding kids accountable. And if you don't hold kids accountable and you continually let that student interrupt the classroom and interrupt teaching, you're not going to get anything done. It's going to be frustrating for the other 25 kids in the room. It's going to be frustrating for the teacher. It's going to be frustrating for the school and the administrators. Yes, we need to refer them to the proper places, and that is for mental health or behavioral issues and the different programs that we have. But we also simply just plain need to hold kids and parents accountable, because some of these kids come in and they're just want to have a good time. Let's face it, they aren't worried about education right now. And we've got to take those kids and we've got to refer those kids to where they need to be to get them back on track. But we still need to have discipline in the classroom before learning can occur. Thanks.
Candidate Toni Ottaviani, your thoughts?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you break up every now and then, but we are getting the gist of what you're saying, though.
All right, well, let me know. So I've done a lot of work with the Union Rescue Mission, and a lot of the kids that are there are in our Allegany County schools. And most of the kids that I worked with were elementary and middle school, but some were high school. And I think definitely treat elementary school, middle school students as to how we should treat high school students in this regard. All that being said, I agree. There has to be accountability for students. You can't let them off the hook at any age completely, because that would be not doing them any service. However, some of these kids' home life is so bad. We can talk a little bit about what we think it is. the reality is it's so bad that you can't even imagine how bad it is. I mean, it's really, really bad. So what I know we should never do is just sort of lose them in the system. We should never just say, oh, you're so therefore you're suspended. You know, you're somehow thrown into some class where we're really just never going to see you again. We're going to let you graduate to the next grade and let the next year teachers worry about you. That happens a lot, and that's something we definitely should not do. I think we need to make sure we're showing empathy and love to these kids, especially at the younger ages, and we should get more adult mentors involved, and even student mentors. You know, somebody who can come alongside these kids, who's not a teacher, who's not a principal, but somebody who can befriend them, put their arm around them, and say, hey, you know what? Let's move forward together. Let me help you. Let me show you. And I'm telling you that I've seen it happen a million times. That is the best way and the really only way to reach the kids that are in that category of disrupting a classroom so often that it.
Okay, thank you, Tony. And the final bite at the apple will come from candidate Crystal Bender.
I think this is one topic we seem to all agree on. I hear a lot, you know, the school system's main purpose is to educate, and I agree with that. I hear a lot of people, it's not their responsibility to feed these kids and keep them all evening in the after school program. But the reality of it is the teachers have a heart, and they don't want to see those kids go home hungry all weekend. They don't want them to not have a safe place to go. And it's not just the school system that's seeing it. My husband, we've been involved in youth sports with coaching, and same thing, these kids get dropped off at practice. They don't have clean clothes. They don't have the equipment that they need. They don't have the drinks to maintain during the practice. He worries every season about a lot of these children and what they're going through at home. And it has become a drop off. They drop them off at school, they drop them off at practice, or they drop them off at whatever church activity they're going to. And it's not good. And no, it's not the school system's responsibility, but we have to join in with the rest of the community and just help take care of it. So I think the social workers that have been added are a great step forward. But I also agree with the discipline side of things. You can't get a free pass for that. And if they don't have anybody at home teaching them respect and rules, that also has to come from school then, if the nurturing is going to come as well.
Thank you. We've reached about the halfway point in our forum. We will continue in 3 minutes on WCBC, AM 1270, FM 103.1, WCBCradio.com, and also via Allegany Media.
And real quick, if you unmute my mic, Paul. And we can't forget who's bringing us this coverage. Eggle Nursing and Rehabilitation is a 5-star faculty that consistently ranks near the top of the state of Maryland's Family Satisfaction Survey. One or more reason you can trust the care of your loved, be it for the complete rehabilitation and all levels of long-term care, including Alzheimer's care, to the staff of Eggle. See the difference Eggle Nursing and Rehab can make for you and your family. Stop by for a visit today. And with so many changes in our lives right now, one thing that hasn't changed is Service Master of Allegany County's commitment to being there for their community. For water, fire, mold damage, restoration, or sanitizing services, call them today at 301-722-8459. So this is brought to you by, the sponsorship is brought to you by Eggle Nursing Rehabilitation Center and Service Master of Allegany County. We'll be right back with you.
Back in 3 minutes. We have returned to our candidate forum. We were in the process of discussing some of the commentary coming in on the WCBC Facebook page. Our director of social media, Alex McDonald, has been monitoring that. And Alex, give us a couple of comments. And again, these are not ones to throw back at the panel because that would screw up the timing. But these are ones that we will certainly take note of and ask in our news coverage over the next couple of days. Alex?
A woman by the name of Emily, she commented and said that she's so glad that they will conduct a proper search down the road. Thank you, Mr. Blank, for offering this opportunity. There was also a comment that said as to, let me find it. Oh boy. Put prayer in schools and pastors. That would be a huge benefit. Emily also commented and thanked Mr. Leptic. Counselors should not just act as career guidance. I guess counselors to be more towards the counselors for the middle and high school. So Facebook is staying active, and we thank you for following us on there.
Very good. Our next question in the forum will come from WCBC's Brian Gowans. And to answer the question will be Linda Wittmeyer. Brian, what do you got?
Thank you, Paul. In recent years, when I've participated in these forums, there's always a question about the Board of Education's relationship with the county commissioners. But I think more recently, in the past, say, 18 months, it's been a focus on the relationship between the members of the school board members with each other. We've had heated debates, accusations between members of ethics violations, and a series of 3-2 votes. Recently, one member said on the air 2 weeks ago that he felt some other members on the board were conspiring to have him removed from the board. And one member described it to me as a dysfunctional situation at best. So if elected, how would you create a more harmonious working relationship among the board members?
Linda Wittmeyer, you get the question first.
Thank you. I am the type of person that I try to kind of be the intermediate person. I like to listen to all sides. I don't judge. And on the other hand, I can take up for myself. And I don't feel that I have the need to accuse other people, to insinuate other things. I have a problem with the constant back and forth. I think a board needs to work together. It's a hard job to have 5 people agree all the time, but I think it's important to compromise and not throw a fit when you don't get your own way. Every adult has a job that your boss, you don't always agree with what they say, but you find a medium ground where you can take care of things, do your job, do what you need to do. It concerns me that I think for the past year and a half, that hasn't been happening. And as a board member, I like to think that I would hear everyone's side and make my decision and not always try to make everybody see it my way, and that I would be gracious enough to accept the differences that we all have and compromise.
Ed Root, you went on the board that was already split. Your thoughts?
Well, that's an interesting point because we had essentially a 3-2 split on the board. And when Mr. Foote was removed, I replaced him. If you recall, at the December meeting, which was my first meeting, I read a statement which emphasized the fact that I thought board members needed to be independent, come to meetings prepared, debate, and make decisions. I didn't think we should be making decisions before the meetings and simply going through the motions at a meeting. I would have to say, when I first got on the board, there was a certain degree of tension. There's still tension. We're not ready to sit around a campfire yet and sing Kumbaya. But I would say that this board has an evolving relationship, which has improved. I don't think we're always going to have 5-0 votes. but I don't see that necessarily as a sign of dissension. Sometimes differences of opinion exist among well-meaning people. I see my role on the board as trying to mediate, broker decisions, and use my knowledge and experience to help the other board members make as good of decisions as we can. And while I don't think we've reached it yet, I do believe this board has made significant progress in the area of working together.
Crystal Bender, your thoughts?
I am fully confident in myself that I can have a civil working relationship with anybody on the board. As a business owner, I deal with difficult and people who are easy to deal with every single day, whether it be employees or customers or other clients. You're not always going to agree. You're an elected board from all different people in the county. So you're not going to agree on everything, and that's okay. I don't think we have to. But I think we all need to be able to walk into a room, respect each other, sit down around the table and talk about the issues and not get our feelings, personal feelings, too involved with things. I like numbers, I like logic, I like data, and use more of that to make decisions than always just what's going on and the drama that's been going on in the past. And I think we can move forward and get past all of that.
How about it, Mikeelliptic? What are your thoughts?
Well, as in any professional organization, you're going to have dissension, and a lot of times I don't really believe it's all negative. I think differences in opinion can actually be very healthy for a professional establishment as an elected board of education. The problem stems when you have something called groupthink, where everybody agrees and just pushes things through. I mean, everyone has a different set of experiences and different additions that they can bring to the table to really maybe form an idea into something that will be very beneficial for our public school system. So I don't think anyone that has a difference in opinion is necessarily a bad thing. As a member of management for 18 plus years, I mean, I've had a lot of negative discussions and situations with employees and customers or this and that. So, you have to go to the table. You have to learn how to negotiate. You have to work together, because at the end of the day, the most significant and most important thing is making the decisions that are in the best interest of the students and teachers. That's what we would be elected to do. That's what we are elected to do. And that should be the main focus. Thank you.
Toni Ottaviani has been victimized a little bit by the broadband that we had all commented on. That would be a main goal, to get this county to a better broadband situation. Toni, you get the next question here, and again, I'll help you through it as best I can.
All right. Okay. So I think that first thing we need to do is understand that we are elected representatives. So if we're representing the people's will, then that eliminates a lot of this personal drama immediately, because what I personally think and feel about something is important, but it is no more important, and it's certainly not more important than the overall will of the people. So that's got to be number one. That'll help take away some of this divisiveness. On that, of course, disagreement is a good thing. I mean, debate is a good thing. But if we just check our egos at the door, remember we're doing the people's will, not our own will. And not just what's best for the people, but what the people actually want. Because what I think might be best is not what as an elected official. So I think if we do those things, we can eliminate a lot of the negative drama, personal drama that we deal with, that we see that is being dealt with, and we can move forward. And that's no shot at anybody who's there now, because that's just human nature. I mean, all of us go through that. We have to get rid of our ego first to be able to get through and do what's right. So
Thank you, Toni. Tammy Fraley, you take it next.
I would just like to say that as part of being on a board and serving on the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, part of this process is the fact that on purpose, there's multiple positions available on the board. And in Allegheny County, we have 5. And the reason for that is so that you can have those healthy differences, but you're also should be representing your county. They elected you for the reasons that they wanted to, and you're able to provide your input for what the decisions are. I think, unfortunately, there are times in the last year and a half that the media has created drama that didn't exist, as well as it's unfortunate that sometimes certain board members call out other board members specifically through the media. That doesn't help a working relationship. A working relationship should be where you work together, you work out your differences. As part of a board, we purposely have executive session to work through things that have of a personal nature. And a lot of times that means we need to be able to, as a board, talk openly and honestly about what we feel is important or what we've been told is important, much like Mr. Ottaviani said, and work through that so that then when we come out, we are working together as a team. And part of that also is that we had last year or 2 years ago, the teachers went through a program called Mindset, and it was changing from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And I think that's really where Allegheny County needs to move at the Board of Education. We need to realize we're not fixed. We're not stuck in a box. Let's think outside the box and let's be growing forward and take out the personalities and work together as a team as 5 board members, not individual board members. Thank you.
Deb Lippmann, how about your thoughts on this issue?
Well, certainly reasonable, well-meaning people can disagree. And so I think, as some people have said, that there's really nothing wrong with disagreement. The key, though, is respect among board members. So if all board members are coming into meetings and coming into discussions, first of all, with their motivation always being doing what's best for students and for teachers in the county, then they are all able to respect one another that and know and trust that each board member is trying to do what's right. So what I would say is that the board members need to, and I think this is something that I would be strong at, the board members need to take each issue, think about it critically without forming coalitions that, blindly follow one another, and always assess each question as to how it's going to affect students and teachers. If they do that, I think that the congeniality kind of comes along with it.
Steve Lewis, you've heard all the answers. Now you get to give yours.
Oh, how about if I give a different one?
Okay, that's fine.
I think what I would bring to the table is leadership. I think you have to develop a set of skills as an administrator, and you use those successfully over the years. People forget, but at one time when I was at Fort Hill High School, we had over 1,200 students and well over 100 employees. And you had to learn how to negotiate. You had to learn how to mediate. You had to learn how to compromise. Then when I was the director of athletics for the county, I went downstate and had to do the same thing with all of the ADs from all the counties, all the supervisors from all the counties. As a matter of fact, we negotiated, we mediated, and we compromised and turned the whole athletic arena around so that the teams from Alleghany and Garrett County didn't have to travel downstate all the time. We could host games at Frostburg. We could host games in Allegheny County. And that was a major impact financially for our teams in Allegheny and Garrett County. And I led that charge and was very successful. So those are some of the things that you have to just learn over the years and develop that set of skills. You have to have a certain demeanor. You have to have a certain attitude. And, I think I bring all those things to the table, and I think I would be a great fit with whoever I work with because basically of my experience should say it all. Thanks.
Thank you. This is sort of a follow-up question to that. A breach of the confidential nature of executive sessions led in part to the removal of one board member and allegations that others have released protected information. What is your opinion of this part of board internal operations? Is it too locked down, or should it be a little looser, or perhaps maybe even tighter? First to answer this question will be Mikeelliptic. Michael?
Honestly, I believe it depends on the information. I mean, if it's something that should remain confidential, then it shouldn't leave an executive session. I mean, there's a reason why an elected board goes into an executive session to discuss things that should remain confidential, especially personnel issues or anything that, you know, may be sensitive that the general public should not know. So really, if something's being held in confidence and has been discussed in an executive session, I don't believe any of that information should be disseminated among the general public until it's necessary to do so.
Steve Lewis, will come to you second on this question.
Well, I think that there are certain things that, again, need to be confidential, but it depends on what it is. It depends on what area you're talking about. If you're talking about certain personnel issues, you can't be forthcoming with everything, but there are certain things that I think we could have been a little bit more transparent about from the board over many years. And sometimes it isn't just what somebody wants to know about somebody. It's somebody wants to know about the general policy. Well, what's this policy? I mean, how does that work? I mean, a lot of people have those questions and they aren't answered, and therefore basically rumors run rapid. So you could put some of those rumors to rest if you just address what the policy is and why you can't say certain things. And, you know, there are certain things that I think you can give your opinion on. And we don't do that sometimes. I think sometimes we need to think like, oh, we all need to talk and speak as one. And that's true on some subjects, but on some subjects you can have your own opinion. Thanks.
Tammy Fraley, you've been in those board meetings. What do you think?
Can you repeat the question just to make sure, because I dropped off and came back. So
that good old internet, huh? Okay.
That's right. It's awesome, especially with two kids.
All right. Breach of the confidential nature of executive sessions led in part to the removal of one board member and allegations that others have released protected information. What is your opinion of this part of board internal operations?
Okay. I believe that, and I've said this before, being confidential regarding executive session items is not board local policy. That's the law. As part of the process that requiring that as individuals, when you're in executive session, you can only go into executive session for certain reasons, and those are covered by the Open Meetings Act. And those reasons that are allowed you to go into executive session, therefore, are confidential. And those items stay in executive session, and the discussions and opinions stay in executive session. And it's very important and critical that we all as a board speak as one, not as individuals. We need to speak as a board. That's part of the process that has to take place to allow it to be civil and make decisions, so that no matter whether you necessarily agreed with it as an individual board member, if something was decided by the board, it was a board decision. So you need to stand by that. And also we have counsel who lets us know what's confidential and what's not. That's why we have board counsel in our executive session meetings, as well as during our public meetings. His job, one of his jobs, is to ensure that we are following the laws and the policies and procedures regarding confidentiality. So that's what we follow.
Crystal Bender, you're next.
So obviously I'm not currently on the board, and I don't know those ins and outs. I don't know what legal counsel is advising them, but I think the general public would like to know who is voting and what they're voting for, just the general outcome. And I do think that is important, because you're elected and people are electing you to make the decisions on their behalf. And if we don't know who voted which direction, Do you want them elected again? Do you want to change your mind and put somebody else in there? So I don't know that it's necessary all the private information that people want to know, but more of who took a stance on which position and which way they voted. And it does seem like there could be a little more transparency on that. But again, I don't know what the council is advising, so I'll leave it in my opinion for now.
Linda Wittmeyer, what do you think?
I understand that there are things that are confidential that can only be discussed in executive session and should not be shared with specifics. I think the general public just wants to hear why something was done. They just want to know. And we go back to that transparency. You can't always stand and say, I'm not allowed to discuss that. I'm not allowed to discuss that. Yes, you are. You can give the public a little bit. We decided to do that. It was an agreement with the board that we move forward, that we don't pursue that we did it this way, whatever it may be. I think you can still keep the confidentiality while you satisfy the public, the voters, and give them a little bit of, instead of saying, I can't talk about it, I'm not talking about it. The board comes together as a group, says, this is what we're going to say. A spokesperson could be anyone to just explain that, yes, we did all come together. We all agreed. We listened to some things that you all had to say, and we acted on that. And the confidentiality part, the employee, the personnel, whatever, we can't discuss it. But I don't think we need to hide behind a tree every time a constituent asks us a question. And I will be perfectly honest with everyone whenever I can be.
Candidate Deb Littman, how about weighing in on this?
I think that in most cases there is a very clear distinction between things that the boards are able to be completely transparent about. I think most boards value transparency for things that they are able to share with the public. I know I've been to several board meetings in the last, before we got shut down and couldn't go, but I've been to a number of board meetings and I've been actually very impressed by how much is made public in those meetings. I mean, you get a lot of detail and a lot of nitty gritty when you go to those meetings and listen. At the same time, there are issues that by their nature must be kept confidential. And as other people have said, that's the purpose of executive sessions, so that board members can talk about issues that are sensitive, that involve other people's personal information, personnel issues about students, issues about hiring, that must remain confidential. And I think that you elect people to boards because you hope that you are able to trust them, and that in doing so, that they're going to make good decisions for things that they can't share, and then share whatever is appropriate.
Thank you. Toni Ottaviani, your thoughts?
I'm not so this criterion is for what what's not. On the surface, I don't necessarily think or understand why 99.9% of everything the board does, to me, ought to be a matter of public knowledge. Because again, we're talking about people who are elected. We're talking about we're making decisions for these people's children. So really, I can't imagine how many things, or too many things, that would be things that couldn't be talked about. Even some personal things, because at some point, personnel/personal things that involve my kid, you darn well better know that I want to know what it is. We had to keep it secret from you because I don't want to hear that. I want to know what the truth is. across the board. And unless it's something that is whack and totally out of sync with what the people want, then it should be pretty easy just to say, yeah, this is what we did. This is how we did it and why we did it, period.
Thank you. And Ed Root, you get the last word.
Okay. Two things. First of all, almost all board decisions have to be taken as public action. There is a list under the law, under the Open Meetings Act, of I think it's 15 items that may be dealt with in executive session. In other words, confidentially behind closed doors. Board members have access to a lot of information, but one thing they don't have access to, generally speaking, is personnel, because the board has only one employee, and that's the superintendent. All other people in the system work for the superintendent. The board has only two functions with personnel. One is approving initial contracts, and the other is a judicial role when there is an issue that may require action against the teacher or other employee or a student. We cannot divulge that information. That is confidential, and there would be no public action on that. An example would be if a teacher were charged with somehow or other exploiting a student. The superintendent normally doesn't even tell us the name of the person. He will tell us that there is an instance where a teacher has been accused of something. And the reason for that is we have to act as a jury. We're not supposed to know much about a case like that until it is before us and the evidence is presented. So it has to be kept confidential. If it were to get out, it would jeopardize a criminal investigation, and it could subject a board member to legal action. There is no criminal offense in breaching confidentiality, but it can lead to other problems, including removal from the board. I know that that's not an answer that a lot of people are going to like, but the bottom line is there are things that board members deal with that are so sensitive that it can't be divulged.
Thank you. I will let the public know and candidates know that the Maryland Open Meetings Law, there is a primer online that you can take a course and go through it online and know what the limitations are and what you are not limited to do. We're going to take another break and return with more of our coverage. Alex, do you have anything that you need to jump in here on?
We just need to say that Service Master of Allegany County is restoring your home and peace of mind. So Service Master and Eggle Nursing Home. Let me pull up that one real quick. Eggle Nursing and Rehab consistently ranked in the top 10 of all facilities in Maryland. Stop by for a visit and see the difference Eggle can make for you and your family. They're sponsoring today's forum. And now I think we're going to go to a brief 3-minute break, and we'll be back.
the Allegheny County Board of Education Forum here on WCBC, AM 1270, FM 103.1, and at WCBCradio.com. We're at the studios of Allegany Media on the downtown Cumberland Mall. We have, we believe, one more question, maybe a quick lightning round question, and then closing statements from each of the candidates coming up. They would get a 1 minute summary to do. And with our next question, our final big question, is Brian Gowans.
And this is sort of a two-part question. Before COVID-19, most of the discussion on education matters were on the Kirwan Commission recommendations that ultimately did receive approval in the General Assembly session, and that could lead to a tax hike for Allegheny County residents. The question is, would you support implementing the Kirwan Commission recommendations even if it meant a significant tax hike for local residents? And part two of that, would you like to see Allegheny County School Board have taxing authority?
Going first on this one will be Toni Ottaviani. Tony?
Yeah, I would say no and no. More taxes on businesses and people are absolutely something I do not support for any reason. And as far as the Kirwan Commission goes and all that stuff, I mean, I'm glad as to what happened. And as far as the board having taxing, authority, again, no way. I think as it is, we need less people with authority to tax us and less taxes, period. End of story.
Thank you. Deb Littman.
Well, in answer to the question about the Kirwan legislation, I think it's important to note that one of the central features of the Kirwan Commission recommendations had to do with creating equity among counties. And what that means for a county like Allegheny County, which is one of the has one of the highest rates of poverty in the state, is that it would allow our students to have more resources, more in line with resources of students that students have in other wealthier counties in Maryland. And that to do that, the state would provide some additional funding based on poverty numbers and median tax numbers, that kind of thing. So in many ways, I think the Kirwan legislation could have helped us. That being said, the governor has vetoed it for now and has said that the money's just not there, in particular in light of the COVID-19 situation and the extra funding that has had to go into helping people who are struggling because of that. As far as the county Board of Education having the ability to tax citizens directly, no, I wouldn't support that. But I do think it's important for the county to have a strong Board of Education. I think that a strong Board of Education makes the county stronger, just like strong economic situation in the county helps make the Board of Education stronger. So I think that we need to make sure we remember that the economic situation in our county and the quality of our education in the county are tied together.
Thank you. Ed Root, your turn.
Okay. There are a lot of things in Kirwan that I support. The one thing I would not support is that we would have tax increases to fully implement it. The governor vetoed it. At the same time, he also vetoed some tax increases. Allegheny County is either the poorest or the next to the poorest county in the state. The other option is Somerset County. And it depends on whether you want to use the assessable tax base or median income. The state has a lot of education formulas which provide money. Some of those formulas probably need to be looked at. On the one hand, we get extra money because we're poor, but on the other hand, we lose money because according to the state, we're wealthier than we appear. We have property on the tax rolls that are not taxed. given the fact that the coronavirus has hit both the state and the county economies, we're going to have difficulty funding Kerwin for the next year. So I don't think Kerwin's going to be implemented until at least fall of 21 or fall of 22. What I would like to see happen is some changes in existing formulas. For example, the gambling money, both the lottery and the casinos, were both passed in the name of education. Well, education never got a lot of money out of either one of them. I would like to see the state go back and change the percentages that go to education to increase that a little bit. We would never notice that because that's gambling money. It's going to happen. As far as taxing authority, definitely not. You only need to look north to Pennsylvania where school boards can tax.
Thank you. Steve Lewis, your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I think Kerwin had some great points to it, and some. Well, it wasn't passed, so that goes to side. So we won't have that. I think we may see Kerwin come back with a lot of different changes in it. Hopefully, some changes that are for the good. I would not want the Board of Education to be a taxing authority. I lived in PA for 2 years, so I know how that works. And we missed out some things on Kerwin, but I just think that if we just be patient, maybe the state and that's hopeful thinking sometimes, but maybe the state will come through and change some of the formulas that Dr. Root talked about. I agree with Dr. Root. Some of those formulas need change, and there wouldn't be that much money that would be really diverted from some of the larger counties to help us. Anyway, we'll wait and see what happens with Kerwin. Thanks.
Tammy Fraley, your thoughts?
I agree with the concept of Kerwin and the areas that it covered. One of the biggest things that we need to consider is separating the cost from the benefits and talking about whether Kerwin was good or bad in the sense of what it could do for education in Maryland. I think the concept of it was very good, and it would have made a difference. It would have helped not only the teachers, but also it would have helped early childhood development as well as the Career Center, which are two things that in this county are very important. Like Dr. Root said before, and I don't think we've mentioned the Career Center, but those are two key areas in our county that would help just based on the economic development needs and where there are jobs, as well as just the early childhood part. I think that you have to consider the wealth formula, like Dr. Root said. That is something that they've been looking into. And I know our delegation for at least the 4 years that I served has talked about getting that formula changed and talking about between Allegheny County and Garrett County, because, just because Garrett County has Deep Creek Lake, they're like wealthy. And it's not just that. So we need to work together with other counties. I don't think we as a Board of Education should be a taxing authority, especially for ourselves. That seems like we would not be staying in the lanes that we should stay in. We should just stay and focus on the educational needs of our students and the teachers and everybody that works for the system, and not do a taxing from the Board of Education. Thank you.
Mikeelliptic.
I support Kerwin. I think that a lot of the enhancements that were noted by that particular organization would have been fantastic for our school system here in Allegheny County. The biggest concern that I have is with a tax increase. Of course, I do not support a tax increase here in our county. However, as Dr. Root and a few others have mentioned, the casino money is an essential part of revenue. And the county receives 3.75% of the video gaming revenue from Rocky Gap. So that in 2019, that totaled about $2.3 million. The Allegheny County Board of Education only received $80,000 of that $2.3 million. I personally think that's unacceptable. I think those numbers and those formulas should be adjusted. that the casino was placed here in this county under the assumption that the Board of Education would have received additional funding, and $80,000 of $2.3 million is not sufficient enough, and I think that needs to be revised. And whether it can be done locally or at the state level, those formulas must be adjusted. And to the second part of your question, I do not believe that the Board of Education should be a taxing authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal Bender, your thoughts on this issue?
Before coronavirus, I agreed with the concept of the Kerwin Commission, with the ideas for the enhancements for education. The tax increase always worried me. The state level, they have a way to fund it, great, but locally, I think we're going to lose people if we have another tax increase to pay for that. I agree with the governor's decision to veto it. I don't think this is anything that can move forward anytime in the near future, and I think it's going to be years before they should move forward, because all the money is going into coronavirus relief, as it should. We're in unprecedented times, and we have to get through it, and we can't spend money of anything in that large of an amount right now. As for the taxing authority, absolutely not.
Thank you. And with the last word on this question, Linda Wittmeyer. Linda, I'm not hearing you. Are you muted?
I was muted.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
You are now officially unmuted.
Okay. I'm not a fan of the Kerwin. There were some parts of it that looked good. When I worked for the Board of Ed, I worked for many grants, and there is no such thing as equitable disbursement, because every grant I ever worked for, the majority of the money went to Baltimore City, Montgomery County, Baltimore County, and there was never any accountability for that money. For example, I worked for a dropout prevention program, and their dropout numbers never changed. They got the bulk of the money, but it never changed. And that concerns me about Kerwin. I don't think it will be equitably distributed. Kerwin had over 87% of the money going to salaries, and that was for current teachers and to hire new teachers. And only 6% of it was going to career and college planning. That concerned me a lot. They surveyed Marylanders, and over 50% of them said they did not want any tax increases for education. The tax increases would have been about 52%, which in these times, we can't afford it. There aren't very many families that could afford it. And as far as the Board of Education being able to tax, I would be completely against that. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the point in the program where we will have concluding statements, give a little direction to our director, Ryan, that I want to keep this at 1.5 minutes so we can use this time wisely. And our candidates, if there's something that we have not covered that you think that we should have, you can use this time as well to address that. To kick things up and kick things off in our opening and closing statements will be Steve Lewis.
I don't understand what your closing statement's going to. What was it you want me to talk about?
You could talk at a closing statement, or if there's an issue out there that you have not heard us bring up that you think that we ought to be talking about, you can bring it up now.
I got it. No, I think you've covered everything pretty effectively there. I think you've got a broad range of topics that we talked about. I would say that in closing, I think of time, because of the virus, because of the things that are going on right now, it's a time to have someone with experience. It's a time to have someone that has been there and done that, that's experienced with budgets and policies and experience with running a system. And so that we can effectively try to move on and open. If you already know how things are running and how they're supposed to run, then we can move on now to try to open up open things up as well as normal. I think one of the things that we have to have in our back of our minds, besides the educational process, which is the number one thing, that's number one. But number two, we need to provide some activities for these kids if we get back to school, and we need to know how to do that safely. Whether it's a limited athletic competition or school plays and musicals or dances or whatever it might be, we need to take a look at those protocols. We need to take a look at what we need to do to try to provide some things for kids to do, because mentally it's tough. These kids haven't been around each other for a long time, and they miss that. We've been doing online education pretty effectively, but we need to start to think and take a look at, as well as when we open up schools, what can we provide for the kids besides just the educational process, which is number one. It's number one, but we need to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mikeelliptic. Michael?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Paul. And I want to thank WCBC and Allegany Media for hosting this forum this evening. I want to reiterate that I am running in this election to be a voice for all students, teachers, and parents, and to make the necessary decisions to better our public education system. My campaign team and I have devised a 6-point plan that will strategically enhance the public school system. This plan consists of promoting integrity and ethical leadership, increased mental health awareness, enhancing school security-related protocols and anti-bullying efforts, academic enrichment, improving communication between students and parents and teachers, and being a strong advocate for all teachers. If elected, the decisions that I make will always be in the best interest of the students and teachers of this county. It is time to put political differences aside and begin working together and making the decisions that are necessary, that are student and teacher focused. As President John F. Kennedy once quoted, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." If you would like more information about my campaign, please visit my website at www.electmikeelliptic.com or on my Facebook page. I'm asking for your support, your vote during this primary election. Thank you.
Thank you. Toni Ottaviani.
Not on mute there. I am on the team that says we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So as much as I understand we have to move forward and progress is a good thing, I can't stand when it's always about the budget, and the budget always has to be more than what it was last year. I don't understand why that has to be the case outside of paying teachers more and staff more, which I'm always in support of, the ones that deserve it, let's say. But I just feel like I like traditional education. I like the way that, I don't think that, and I would look at the education system overall in the last 50 years and go, wow, we're pretty darn good. There's no sense in every year trying about reinventing the wheel. I also think that it's got to be about way more than just the budget. We always hear about the budget. I think that the budget is obviously important, but it isn't the only thing, and it isn't the most important thing. As throwing money is not always the way that education is going to get better. In my personal opinion, that is not the case. Looks like I'm having some problem here. I also think that we have to keep in mind, and then I always have in mind, if I were to win this election, that I'm representing the people's will, period. That's the most important thing. The people's will when it comes to education in Allegany County. Beyond that, I think absolutely we got to get open in September. There's no question. If I was voting for it or had anything to do with it or say, there's no question.
Okay, Toni, looks like we've lost you. I gave you a couple extra seconds there because we did have some internet.
Zombie apocalypse.
Okay. Thank you. Our next closing statement will come from Linda Wittmeyer. Linda, I think we need to unmute you again.
Muted. Okay.
There we go.
I just want to thank Allegheny Media and WCBC for hosting this for us. My closing statement is I am also a parent for children who went through the Allegheny County Public School System. Very active. They were all athletes. They were all student athletes. I am not in this for any agenda. I am not in this for me. I am in this for the teachers and the students and the parents of this county. And I will always be accessible. I will always be transparent. I will always be honest. And I will always be respectful of other people's opinions and thoughts and my fellow board members. I want to be that person that people can come to, parents can come to, and I will be their voice. There's too many families in our area who do not have a voice and don't feel that they have a voice. And I want to be that person. So on election day, I hope everyone remembers that I'm a parent and I'm in there for the kids and the teachers.
Thank you. Crystal Bender.
So I am a lifelong resident of Allegheny County. I have 2 children who are currently in the system. I've served on other local boards in the community, and community involvement has been something that's always been important to our family. Serving on other boards, serving at the church, serving in Pee Wee sports, whatever we can do, we're involved. I volunteer my time at the school, anything that's needed. And so I think this is one step forward in another direction that I can continue to get involved. And as a parent and a community member and a business owner in the area, I know that I have what it takes to move forward and make good decisions on behalf of the students and the teachers and all the staff in the county and represent the other voters in the area. So I ask for everyone's vote moving forward. If you haven't already mailed in your ballots, please do so. And I have a Facebook page. You can reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Deb Littman.
Well, I have 3 students who are currently in school at the public school system here in Allegheny County. So I've seen firsthand how decisions made at the county level really impact students on a day-to-day basis. And so my motivation is entirely to improve educational opportunities for our students, to improve resources for teachers, to allow them to help students learn and grow. I am absolutely willing to answer any questions that people might have that didn't get answered tonight. You can reach me through my Facebook page, Deb Lippmann for Board of Education. Message me and I promise I will send an answer. And I hope that we end up with a board this coming November who will work together to put students first.
Thank you. Ed Baruch.
Oh, I have a wide variety of experience and knowledge in education and a lot of years in education. I have probably a unique perspective because I started my career as a classroom teacher. I've been a building level administrator, and I've been a college professor, a department chair, and a dean at Frostburg State. As the dean of the College of Education, I work with school systems, including Allegheny County, all over the state and elsewhere. I am now in my 7th year on the Allegheny County Board of Education. I served 2 terms, that's all you're allowed, on the Maryland State Board of Education. My first 4 years, I was appointed by a Democrat and I was a member of the board. My last 4 years, I was appointed by a Republican and served as president, elected by my colleagues each of those years. I learned how things work at the state level, which was very helpful when we needed the funding for Allegheny High School. I would use my knowledge and my experience for Allegheny County. And I would also, although many of you have already voted, but if you haven't voted, I would hope you would consider me to be returned to the Allegheny County Board of Education.
And with the last word, Tammy Fraley.
like to thank Allegany Media and WCBC for having this forum. I think it provides great information to the voters. They'll be able to see it in multiple formats, so I appreciate that. I would like to note that those that don't know me, I am originally from Texas and grew up in a city in Texas that was quite large. Their graduating class when I graduated was 1,500 in their senior class. So I bring knowledge from having children in the system across multiple areas and multiple disciplines. Some wanted to be athletes, some others wanted to be programmers. So I think that, as I said 4 years ago, I will continue to promote parental involvement and community involvement. And I would also like to continue to move Allegany County forward by working together with the county, with the state legislators, and working together with the Maryland Association of Boards of Education to ensure that we do and show what we have in Allegany County, because a lot of people want to come here. And I think we need to keep that momentum going and show what we have for education, as well as what we can do for economic development, especially if we can get the internet. Because having the ability to work from home is something that you can live in a wonderful place and still work from home. And I think we need to explore that with the students. And lastly, I want to say that educational equity is very important, and we need to continue to work towards that in our county and across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for paying attention. I'd like to thank my comrades here at the table, Alex McDonald and Brian Gowans, and Ryan Brenneman, who has done yeoman work in putting all this together. Thanks to Mary Kleitz back at the station, and also Chris Myers, who has been working back there as well to bring it to you live on AM 1270 and FM 103.1 and WCBCRadio.com. Thank you for your time, candidates, and thank you for your time, voters. This is Paul Mullen. Good night.